Michigan does. So Michigan has some more points here. Peter, we were having this discussion. Is it almost disappointing that Miami, and perhaps Miami is playing now a lot better than they were earlier in the year, and that's why they're behind the standings. But is it a little bit disappointing to you that Michigan, they really have to screw things up not to win the CCHA title this year?
Right, but at the same time,
they haven't played particularly great.
We have seen bigger collapses happen in Michigan hockey history.
This is true.
And the big three teams this year, Notre Dame, Michigan, Miami, as it usually is, playing very well. But overall, a pretty weak year for the CCHA. That's disappointing. That said, Michigan seems to certainly have clinched a first-round bye in the CCHA playoffs. But, the difference between being a first and the second and third seed, you might have to face Alaska or Ohio State in the second round as opposed to a lesser team like Ferris State or Northern Michigan.
Right, and you just don't want to play more games in the CCHA playoffs than you have to. But so Adam, does any of the luster perhaps lost with Miami not at the top of their game?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they're still Miami. Enrico Blase is still a good coach. They're still going to make the NCAA tournament. By the way.
It
is a great name.
It's fantastic.
And going into Miami this weekend, that doesn't downplay this series at all because Michigan can really grab a stronghold. And if they can go in and at least win one of those games, it puts them in a great, great position to win the CCHA regular season.
Well, and speaking about the path further down the CCHA tournament road, you could actually see Miami fall out of those top four slots if a Michigan sweep were to occur. And in that case, they have to play an extra series, and maybe they don't make it even into the Joe.
There's no luster lost in this Michigan-Miami series this weekend, even though it's not teams 1 and 2 battling it out for the top seed in the CCHA tournament.
Well, we're going to talk more about Miami's season a little bit later and how they match up with the Wolverines, but let's move on to some bracketology here, Peter.
It's time for bracketology.
Something interesting. Miami is on the outside looking in right now, despite being ahead of Western in the conference standings.
Right, and of course, the NCAA tournament procedure is always somewhat of a mystery, but the way it basically works is that, and it is different this year, is that it's your wins against teams that are over 500 is essentially what truly counts as far as getting into the tournament, which is different. It used to be just wins against the team in the top 25. So now more games are under consideration as far as your seeding in the national tournament bracket. But obviously, Michigan, it seems they're out of reach of a first seed, so you can discount that. It'd be interesting to see if they go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, or St. Louis, Missouri as a 2 seed. That's where it seems to be headed right now, but obviously still a lot of season left. It'll be interesting to see what happens down the stretch.
Right, so there's a lot of things that go into consideration besides just, record and whatnot. Also, you have, the NCAA tries to place teams not in the same conference, in the same bracket.
Close to home.
Right,
there are
close to home.
considerations. There are a million things considered. It goes to a million iterations.
Right.
And you never really know what's going to come as an outcome. I would say Michigan's preferred site would be Green Bay, Wisconsin. Just solid 8 hours away from here, but beautiful Wisconsin.
There's no Fort Wayne this year. I mean,
there's no Fort Wayne. Nothing can live up to Fort Wayne.
Nothing can live up to Fort Wayne, and it's Michigan's going to have to travel at least 8 hours to go to any of those sites. But I think Peter, Green Bay would probably be the most favorable. And it'll be interesting to see if Michigan can end up with that 2 seed. And if they win out, I think it would take winning the CCHA tournament, possibly, to get that 1 seed.
And you'd probably have to go through some really good teams to do it, too. You couldn't just, in that sense, an easier road, the CCHA tournament championship would be actually worse if you're looking at number 1 seed. Yeah. But again, it's hockey. Hockey's a crazy sport. Anything can happen. We saw Michigan 1 seed lose to Air Force. Andrew Volkening. Just an absolutely incredible performance in that game. I think he stopped over 40 shots. Anyhow, that was a disappointing game.
Opening a sore wound.
Yeah, indeed. Well, now one of the things, and I think it's just our role as Michigan fans to nitpick. But one of the things we do need to nitpick, because after that Alaska series, which is looking more like luck than skill, that sweep, and then after this Michigan State series where Michigan didn't convert on the power play, we've seen that power play really struggle, Peter.
Yeah, they started much of the season number 1. They've now dropped to 22nd in the nation, 19.5%. I broke down the Michigan power play earlier today. Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at Michigan's power play from a few weeks ago against the Alaska Redhawks. Now here, you don't have your A crew. There's no Carl Hagelin. There's no Matt Russ. But you do have Lou Cabras, you do have Chad Langus, you do have some offensively talented players. Now let's take a look at what happens here. Kevin Lynch, a guy who normally stands in front of the crease, is playing in the corner. If we take a further look, there are no Michigan players in front of the crease to screen Scott Gardner. That's when the power play is best, when there are players in front of the net. That's not true here. So Michigan tries to cycle the puck, but it's no good, and it's easily cleared by Alaska. There is a quick neutral zone turnover, which is good. However, it just leads to a quick shot in the rush. Look, there are no Michigan players in any position to gather a rebound from this shot. That was a rush shot that could have been done better with a little more patience. Michigan tries but fails to maintain any sort of possession in the offensive zone against Alaska. Alaska easily clears. Michigan tries one last offensive rush, but it's no good. There's another power play that has failed due to trying to be too fancy instead of relying on what has worked best. So to recap basically what we said in that Telestrator segment, you have to work on establishing crease presence, big bodies in front of the net. Don't rely on the dump and chase. Don't rely on fancy things. Just gain possession in the offensive zone, maintain it, get your big bodies in front of the net, cause chaos in the crease. That's what worked at the start of the season. That's what has to get them through.
That seems to be the curse of the Wolverines, so to speak, Adam, is that they establish a presence in the zone. They're moving the puck around where they want, and they're looking for the cross ice between two defender legs, wide open goal pass.
I think all Alaska series and a little bit in Ferris, and I know going back to the Michigan State game at Yost earlier this month, you had a situation where Michigan was always on the outside when they were on the power play, and that's not where you want to be. It's like Peter said, you need to get guys like Matt Russ, Chris Brown, get them out in front of the goal, because without traffic in front of the goalie, you're not going to score many goals, especially on the power play. When you do have that man advantage and you can afford to put that extra attacker in front, maybe draw one of those four guys outside on that box in on that extra attacker, even more traffic in front of the net.
Right, Michigan doesn't seem to be spreading themselves out and taking advantage of every inch of ice they got. Instead, they bunch and in the wrong places, and then it's much easier to defend. The 5-on-4 is not as difficult. Well, speaking of illustrious alum, let's take a look at our illustrious alum. That was our next segment. Lots of debuts recently. These are all recent alums, Peter. Peter. Players, Peter, that played at Michigan while we were students here. So that means in the last couple of years. Chris Summers had his NHL debut. Chad Klarick had his first point on the same night.
Amazing.
No less. Right.
Yeah, well, that first line when our freshman year, when they went to the Frozen Four and lost against Notre Dame, it was Kevin Porter, Chad Klarick, Max Pacioretty, three unbelievable players who had the most amazing production we've seen in college hockey in our time here, and they're all doing well in the NHL right now. It's good to see. Max Pacioretty, 11 points in 20 games. He's been injured a little, but he's having a great season. It looks like his career is off to a great start with the Canadiens.
And you didn't mention Steve Kampfer having a very good rookie season with Boston as well. So Adam, we got to go negative here for a little bit. So does this feed the narrative that perhaps Red isn't as good a coach as everyone thinks, and he always has this talent? Michigan always has more talent than their opponents. It's just hockey recruiting isn't followed very closely because Michigan always gets the best players, the best junior players and whatnot from, partially the under-18 team, development team that's based in Ann Arbor. So with all this talent, more talent than any other program in the country probably, where are the national championships, man? Where are they?
Where are the rings?
Where are the rings? Show me the rings.
Red's a great coach, and I think I'm not going to knock him. I'm not going to knock him. I'm going to say hockey's a game where you can go out and any team can beat almost any other on any given night. You've seen that from Michigan State, a team bottom of the CCHA, really struggling. They've gone out and beat a high-flying Michigan twice. Again, the only team to beat Michigan since the beginning of December is that Michigan State team, right there, sitting only above Bowling Green in the CCHA.
Right.
And it's the way the puck bounces. You have an off night or whatever. But I'm not going to take any of that away from Red. And
it doesn't take anything away.
But look at it this way.
The
Detroit Red Wings are usually the most talented team in the NHL, are they not? How many? They win a lot of cups, but they don't win the cup every year.
They just won 4 in the past 14 years.
That's not enough. I'm going to be a greedy Red Wings fan here. I'm going to be a greedy Red Wings fan.
I would agree that the way the NCAA tournament works, 16 chaos, teams and just single elimination. That's probably the dumbest way to choose a national champion that any sport.
Yeah, maybe even dumber than the BCS.
The BCS actually puts the best team. You can't play multiple games. Here's my point. It's a very simple point. If you have a sport where you can play multiple games. Hockey can play multiple games. Baseball you can play multiple games. Basketball you can play multiple games. So the same thing applies to the NCAA tournament in college basketball a little bit. You need to replicate that. If you really want to know who the best team is, you need to have them play more than once to figure out who is the better team. And hockey in particular, you really, really need to do that.
20
Which
straight.
It's not about Red. You changed the subject. You're not supposed to do that.
I didn't. I said it. I discredited your statement.
What Adam's about to say is that we have the Michigan hockey team has made 20 straight NCAA appearances. Maybe we should.
Last year, barely.
We should take that instead of just 2 rings in that time.
Right. No, that's fair.
It is
That's
a little
fair.
Detroit Pistons of the 2000s-esque.
There are too
I'll
many
give you that.
cross-sport
Too many
analogies.
cross-sport analogies. We
Let's
need to
forget
stop.
this.
We're going to go to commercial break, but we were talking about really great scorers before the break. We'll talk about some great Redhawks scorers afters. A lot of talent. It doesn't take any. Welcome back to WOLV Overtime. Peter, Saul, Adam Brewster, Alex Prasad, talking about the Miami Redhawks right now. Miami has struggled this year. We talked about that already. We don't really need to talk about that. But their offense, Peter, is something to be concerned about. Andy Mealy, Carter Camper, which is a great name. I love the alliteration, Mr. and Mrs. Camper. Both great scorers, atop the nation in scoring.
1 and 2 in the nation. You have Riley Smith right after them, number 4 in the CCHA right now. Truly an offensive powerhouse team. And as we mentioned earlier, Rico Blase has his boys flying as high as ever. Redhawks are a great team. You can never sleep on them. You talk about Michigan being one of the more talented teams in the nation year after year. Enrico Blase has made Miami equally as talented in the past few seasons.
Yeah, we wishfully speculated that he'd go to the NHL eventually at some point in time, but has
Or
not
to
been.
Michigan when drafted tight.
Or to Michigan. Well, hey,
That pops up at the end on MGO blog at the end of every season.
Yeah. Well, that'd be great,
Yeah,
but I don't
yeah.
think there's anything
all
behind
I had
that.
to
That'd be fantastic. And also, you may remember Miami from previous years, especially their ginormous goaltender Connor Knapp. Connor Knapp and Cody Reichard split time for the Redhawks as they did last year as well, both saving shots at a .901 percentage, which is low, but their goals against averages 2.2, 2.3.
Right, but it tells you that it might not be, they're not seeing a lot of shots, and they're not stopping most of them.
Right.
Rather, they're not playing that well, which is the opposite of last year when they both had amazing save percentages, both of them above .930, both of them near the top of the CCHA. That was one of the big reasons for success last year, and that's not happening so far this season.
Go ahead, Adam. Were you going to say something?
I remember looking at Miami's roster at the end of last season and seeing that both Reichard and Knapp were coming back and just being frightened beyond belief that Miami was just going to run all over the CCHA. But it's really been a letdown year for both of them. Both of their stocks were extremely high at the end of the year. You had Knapp playing more games than Reichard, but Reichard was the better goalie in terms of his stats. He had like a .96 save percentage.
Right.
And
right.
unbelievable. And just they've really fallen from grace this year, and you don't really know what to blame that on. Maybe it's the loss of Wingles.
Yes.
On the defense.
Well, but again, because this is hockey, they can make a run in the CCHA tournament. They could get into this NCAA tournament. I guess they're probably in a better position. Right, they're a very scary team. They're probably in a better position than Michigan was at the same point in time last year. So that's something to consider as well. So when we look at this series, we talked a little about Miami's offense. How about Michigan's offense, Peter? So we know the save percentages are low for these two guys, but they're still, well, at least Connor, huge guy, and he's still a good goaltender.
Yeah, well, we talked about it all season long. Just the fundamental plays, simple plays. But if you have to use your talents, use them. Michigan's a very quick team. Miami has a big defense, but that also means kind of a slow defense. So Michigan should just look to, gun around those guys. I like to see the run and gun through the neutral zone this weekend against Miami.
Perhaps a spread offense from the Michigan hockey
Spread
team.
HD offense.
Spread HD offense. What about you, Adam? What about these goaltenders in the Michigan offense?
It's something that Michigan's going to have to get traffic in front of the net. All but 2 of Michigan's goals the past 3 games have come from some sort of production from the point. They need to get back to that as they did in the Alaska series.
All right, quickly, guys, as we're running out of time, and we can't go overtime. Oh, no. How many points does Michigan take out of this series?
CCHA points or NHL points?
CCHA points.
4.
4? Okay, so a win and a tie, perhaps.
I think 3.
3?
A win. I think they split.
I think a split would end up. I think I would be satisfied with a split. Going to Oxford.
Going to Miami.
Oh, you have to. I don't have a choice. I have a choice. I'm not satisfied with a split, everyone. Next week, we'll hopefully be talking about a Michigan sweep. Thanks for watching WOLV Overtime.